I'm going to do a flyover of our genes, our genetic code, and how that relates to inflammation and weight in our brains. Okay, I'll hold up here. So there's a quote I want to start with by Dr. Bruce Lipton. He's done amazing things with epigenetic research, which is the study of our genes' environment. So that's what we really have control of. But he says, genes are not your destiny, they are your potential. So to go on from that beautiful quote, just want to share that our genes are just 20% of the equation. So we're given this code, that's what makes us up from mom and dad, but the epigenetics is the environment. That's like that's our thought life, that's our diet and lifestyle, our exercise and what we put into our body. So that's a beautiful thing, showing us that we can actually adapt, and like the Bible says, as a man thinketh, so he becomes, so we have control over that. So if you, just to put in like an analogy for you, our genes is they're a loaded gun, and then the epigenetics is what pulls the trigger. That's the environment. So just some studies I'll go through really quick. One study showed that 98% of diseases are related to lifestyle choices. The other one is 99% of our genes are the same. It's just 1% of that genome that makes us individuals, makes us unique. So that's kind of interesting. If you think of our genetic code like a cake recipe, we get some of the ingredients from mom, some of the ingredients from dad. If we have a perfect mix, that's wonderful, but a lot of times there's different coatings that get mixed-matched and are not fully functioning. So the least functioning type of gene that we have is called a homozygous. So it's two defective genes that we inherited in our genome. So that's going to decrease the function of our code by at least 70% is what they've studied so far. So that kind of puts you at a disadvantage initially, but you can figure out how to upregulate that. I'll get to that. But so just for an example, if we have a homozygous gene for lactose, so if we drink milk and we have this gene, we are going to be able to break it down because we don't have the correct enzymes in our code to digest that lactose. So that'd be a person that would want to avoid milk and all milk products. Now there's an interesting number, like 15% of European descent are lactose intolerant, but 100% of Asian descent are lactose intolerant. And then African Americans and Hispanics were like 60-ish%. So we're all different, and it depends on where we started, where we come from. So the expression of our genes can change. They're changing by each thought. Each thought produces a chemical response in the body, and that interacts with our digestion, with our moods, and with our overall well-being. An interesting side note is that behaviors can be passed down through generations. That's what we call a genetic miasm, but that's where, and that's in the Bible as well, but like the sins of your fathers are passed down, but we see that in mice studies where the mice are actually trained to avoid certain scents, and that would be like their grandparents were introduced to a scent and harmed with that scent around. And then the next generation would smell that, and they would automatically have that fight or flight reaction, just because it was in their genetic code. But just how much of an impact that we can have on our next generations starting now, that's a beautiful idea. So at the office, we're always trying to find the root cause. So we don't want to chase symptoms. We want to see what is the upstream effect. So instead of covering something up and allowing it to be an issue later on because you actually didn't fix it, we want to see what interactions need to be balanced out. So in each of our genes we have an anti-aging gene, an enzyme. that turns on certain genes. They all don't work. They have to be turned on by the body. So that's where the environmental signal, that epigenetic factor comes in, because that's where if you are eating healthy and you're thinking your thought life as well, you're physically active, those genes are going to be triggered in the correct way. So if you were to look at how to activate those anti-aging enzymes, you want to look at first the toxic load in your life. So that's a lot of what we address in SHAPE. We want to see what chemicals you're around, what foods you're eating, if it's a lot of processed foods, and those enzymes are going to be thriving. Psychological stress is a huge part of it, and Dr. Andrew will share about that. But if you don't filter your water or air, you most likely will have some toxic load added to your body. So once you kind of filter through that, eliminate the smoking, the drinking, the kind of the obvious things, try to figure out why you're on medications, if you can filter off and how you can get off those, get a plan. Then you can look at what you're eating every day. Like start to eat anti-inflammatory. You look at nutritional supplementation to increase those enzymes in your body. And then your exercise and stress management are going to be of utmost importance as well. So kind of the mother of genetics is called methylation. And if you have that gene, well, everybody has that gene, but that gene is kind of coming up popular right now. It's called the MTHFR gene. I won't spell it out for you, but that's just the abbreviation. But what that job, it has a job to turn genes on and turn genes off. So that's pretty essential in order for us to thrive. Some of the things that it helps with is it helps with detoxification, processing hormones, it builds immune cells, it repairs our DNA, and then it produces energy at the cellular level. So some variants of this can, some symptoms, if this gene wasn't working, if your methylation wasn't working, would be diabetes or cardiovascular issues, thyroid dysfunction, chronic infections, chronic fatigue, or digestive issues, weight gain. So that's a pretty big gene to have working for you. And 85% of it works in our liver. So that's why we're always checking the liver, gallbladder, because that flow has got to be perfect for you to be able to thrive. Kind of like a Chinese tidbit for this is if you have a deep crack in the middle of your tongue, you have methylation issues. So the deeper the crack, the worse your methylation is. And that can be changed, but kind of they always have interesting tidbits. So if you do a genetic report, you'll see a whole bunch of genes, and you'll see different variants. You'll see nice green, like you have good functioning genes, and then you'll see some yellow, which is not, it's intermediate, and then you'll have some red. Multiple of the red is an issue, but a lot of us have genes that in our coding that are good, some of them bad, but not all of them are expressing themselves. They just have the potential to work against us. But in the testing, like in SHAPE, as we're testing food sensitivities, a lot of times I find caffeine, and there's several different versions that we test for, but that's one of the things that backs up the liver if it's not functioning or methylating properly. So there's actually a lot of people that are sensitive to caffeine just because it adds to their toxic load, and we are working to reduce that load so your body can thrive naturally. So I'm not going to spell this out, but so I'll talk about some, they're called SNPs, single nucleotide peptides. So that's like the coding for your genes. One of them is called the COMP gene. That helps you break down estrogen and dopamine. So that's all a liver deal. So I know we can go on a rabbit trail chasing hormones and trying to help the pituitary gland, the thyroid, the adrenals, but if the liver isn't methylating properly, then you're still going to be worse off afterward. But it's of utmost importance, especially if you're dealing with fertility issues or anything involving hormones, that you make sure that we get that those sensitivities figured out. Another one that affects the liver is sulfur foods. So, and this isn't for each person, but it's something that we check for because everybody's a beautiful individual that we want to make sure is fully functioning. But if you have a genetic variant for processing sulfur foods, some imbalances, some symptoms of this imbalance could come from messing with your brain chemistry. So that would cause anxiety, that would cause allergic reactions and lung issues, and then digestive distress overall. But some foods that are high in sulfur are wine and beer, eggs, onion and garlic are two that I find a lot for people that are sensitive to it. And then broccoli, cauliflower, and coconut products. So for this, to help upregulate these systems, you need vitamins and minerals. Now ideally you're able to get that from your foods, but at this point in our society we can't get a fully nutrient meal of all the vitamins and minerals we need just on our organic plate. But here's some foods that you can look to add more of to help with this methylation process. Red meats are great, green leafy vegetables, and then beets are also really nice to add into your diet. And I believe that's not a shape-friendly food, but afterward, that's just a tidbit. Some things that displace minerals, so we're always checking for if you need more minerals or if you need some hydration. Heavy metals will replace the essential minerals in your body. And we get heavy metals from taking showers, from drinking unfiltered water, even from breathing in environmental toxins. And all that's going to cause some mischief in your body that we want to make sure you're processing through. Yeast overgrowth, candida, and then chronic fungus infections also mess with your ability to methylate. So another quote that Dr. Bruce Lipton talks about is, DNA doesn't control our biology. Instead, DNA is controlled by signals from outside the cell, including messages emanating from our thoughts. And it's all a God thing. All the epigenetic talk, they're just continuing to prove what God has put into our beautiful atmosphere. So in order to relate this to weight and inflammation, one of the SNPs that I want to bring up is called your VDR, so that's your vitamin D receptor. We all know vitamin D is great for your immunity, but it plays a big role in your gut health. In order to relate that to inflammation, those with a deficiency in dopamine may show signs of depression or low self-esteem, but they also gain weight easily. Dopamine is processed by the vitamin D receptor, and that actually processes minerals and then creates immune cells for us. Now, cortisol, which is our stress hormone, decreases the VDR expression. So that's going to not be able to create minerals or build immune cells. So that's going to be a big thing. That's where our thought life comes in handy, because that's going to help us handle stress and not release cortisol all day long. So some of the symptoms of a reduced VDR expression would be inflammation and hypertension, accelerated hardening of the arteries and vascular integrity. So it plays a lot into that cardiovascular health. Another one that gets a bad rep, but it's a beautiful thing, is cholesterol. Cholesterol is a precursor to vitamin D. We're all about, we love our good fats. We're always just checking if you can break them down, because if you can't, then that's going to cause some issue. But you get that flowing, and then your cholesterol is going to be going well for you. Now, cholesterol is actually a precursor to your energy pathways. So the way your cells make energy, your mitochondria, they get that energy from from cholesterol. So that's going to help with your adrenal gland hormones that naturally produce the hormones that they need to produce, and then your sex hormones as well. So everything that goes in your cycles and sleep, mood is going to help regulate that naturally. And that's where we're trying to get to the upstream cause of the effect and correct it so that everything downstream is improved. So again, liver cells produce the greatest amount of cholesterol. So you can get that from animal-based foods, but then your body also processes it and creates it through a 37-step process. So, I mean, intricately and wonderfully made, that's a beautiful thing. All these things that go into making us live. And one more thing I'll bring up is histamine. So that's a neurotransmitter. It gets a bad rap because a lot of us have excess of it because we don't have the right right enzyme to break it down. But it actually stimulates the production of hydrochloric acid in our gut. And that's why we're always checking for the ileocecal valve, telling you to do your apple cider vinegar or lemon juice. But that's what actually naturally produces it in your body for you. It also helps with allergy responses in the immune system, regulates sleep and hormonal secretion in the brain. One of the big vitamins that I like to check for is the activated version of B6, is because it has its hands on so many different functions in our body. But a big one to transfer histamine into a useful product is it's called P5P. It's an activated version of B6. But then we also have this other enzyme that's it's called the DAO enzyme. It's for breaking down histamine, and that's made in the gut. So low levels of that enzyme are correlated with poor digestive function. So I just want to make sure I leave you with that. Your genes are not your destiny. They are only your potential, or they are your potential. So that should be empowering. I hope I don't. I geeked out a little bit, but let's just take that quote. That would be good. There is a way we go through this. There's in the office we do frequency medicine testing with our kits. We love our kits, but we can go through all sorts of genetic pathways and figure out what's going on in your system. But you can also do a genetic test. And I have more information on that if you want, but it's a beautiful thing when you combine biochemistry with genetics and then with frequency testing, muscle testing what we do, because you get great results. It's a beautiful thing.